Week 11 of the fantasy football season. His running back starts hit every matchup this week. New York Jets at the Patriots Thursday night. Breece Hall, he had a big game last week in the victory versus the Cleveland Browns. And Breece Hall, there was a trade on the table with the Chiefs, but the Kansas City Chiefs didn't want to give up a third for him. So this week in a matchup in New England, one of the better teams in the league, 8-2. I think it's going to be tougher for Breece Hall, but he's getting a full workload, obviously. And he's had two good games in a row. He's a star. Trevion Henderson, they just got to give him the reins now with this New England Patriot team. Last week he went out there and he showed what he could do, the explosiveness. And then the open field, he's gone. He's one of the quickest running backs in all the game. And this week versus the depleted Jet defense, trading their two best players at the deadline, Quinnen Williams and obviously Sauce Gardner. He's a start. And Ramondre Stevenson, we'll see if he comes back with the toe injury, but I don't know how Mike Vrabel and this coaching staff really could get many touches to Stevenson anymore. Henderson showed he could cover a full workload in last week's game at Tampa, and he put up a big game. So this week, if Stevenson's back, like I said, I don't know what to expect. He'll be a fringe option. Commanders versus the Miami Dolphins, another overseas ball game. Bill Krosky-Merritt, he's a sit for me in this one. The upside really hasn't been there for Krosky-Merritt. I know he had a couple good games early in the season, but this offense is depleted. And if he's not getting running room and they're trailing ball games, he's not going to catch the football out of the backfield as well. Chris Rodriguez, if he plays, he's a sit. I know he found the end zone last week, and he found the end zone a couple weeks ago as well versus Seattle Seahawks. But this offense is depleted. Marcus Mariota, Deebo Samuel, to me, pretty much the only two options week in and week out that could be fantasy options, with Zach Ertz in there at times as well. For both backs, it's Devon Achane must start, one of the best running backs once again in fantasy football. And it doesn't take much for Achane to put up numbers. Last week we saw two monster plays out of him, had over 170 yards on the ground, 2 total touchdowns. And this week versus a bad Commander defense, got shredded by Jahmyr Gibbs. He's an easy start. Los Angeles Chargers at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Kamini Vidal, he got off to a slow start in last week's game versus Steelers, and then he was rumbling and he closed that one out. So this week in a great matchup at the Jacksonville Jaguars, one of the worst defenses in the league. I think Vidal goes out there once again, has a good game. Travis Etienne, he's a start, found the end zone last week. It's been a solid season for Travis Etienne, and we thought coming into the year could have been a three-headed committee over there, obviously, where Tank Bigsby was on the roster, but then they traded him away to Philly, and Bashal 2 more weeks than not, he's been a non-factor. So Etienne in a decent matchup versus Los Angeles, and 2 not doing much. He's a sit in this ball game. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Buffalo Bills. Rashad White is a start. Him and Sean Tucker, for the most part, it's been close to a 50-50 split. And Bucky Irvin, head coach Todd Bowles, came out and said still no timetable for Irvin. So the shoulder and ankle injury, obviously a major injury, where at this point you would have thought they would just put him on IR. Obviously was Bucky Irvin, but that's not been the case. So White, good receiver out of the backfield. I know in between the tackles, yards per carry aren't great for Rashad White, but this week at the Bills, where their run defense hasn't been great all season long, he's a starting. Sean Tucker, not going to catch the football much out of the backfield. At this point, if you're going to put him in the lineup, you're going to hope for a goal line stamper. Even though I know last week he did average over 5 yards per carry with Sean Tucker, but like I said, if he's not catching the football and let's say he gets 50, 60 total yards, that's not going to be much for fantasy owners. James Cook, he's a start each and every week. I know last week was a down game, and Buffalo, they just went into Miami and they laid an egg in that one where they couldn't get anything going. So this week back home, and after an embarrassing loss versus a bad team, I think this team, they rely on Cook in this one, and he has a big game. Chicago Bears at the Minnesota Vikings, DeAndre Swift. It's been a great first season for him in this Ben Johnson offense, where Johnson's turned this whole offense around. And this Bear team, one of the best teams in the NFC, believe it or not. So this week in a matchup at a Viking defense that's had trouble stopping running backs, he's a star. Kyle Monangai did find the end zone last week, but obviously easily played second fiddle as the backup running back in that ball game versus the New York Giants, and he's a sit. Aaron Jones a start, and Aaron Jones came off injured reserve, and he took this job back in somewhere. Early in the season, it was pretty much a 50-50 split, but the last couple weeks, Aaron Jones has been the man back there for this Minnesota Viking team. This week, a matchup versus a Chicago Bear team he's obviously very familiar with, going back to his Green Bay Packer days. And this Bear defense, I've said it in a lot of videos, they give up a lot of points, create turnovers, and get to the quarterback. But this week, Jones is start, and Jordan Mason, he's not catching the football out of the backfield. His touches have gone down. And if he's not getting goal line work, he's pretty much not a guy that's going to be an option for fantasy owners. So he's a sit this week. Green Bay Packers at the New York Giants. Josh Jacobs, he's been one of the best running backs all season long in fantasy football, and he came off another solid game versus a good defense of the Philadelphia Eagles. 21 carries, 74 yards, a touchdown in that game, and adding 5 catches, 33 yards, even though he had a crucial fumble late in that game. Josh Jacobs, he's been a workhorse. This offense runs through him over there in Green Bay, and this week in a great matchup at the New York Giants that can't stop the run. He's a start. Tyrone Tracy, Devin Singletary, they're in a split over there of these two running backs for this New York Giant team. So Tyrone Tracy, more the receiving back out of the backfield, and Singletary more physical back in between the tackles. But this week a tough matchup versus the Green Bay Packers. They bottled up Saquon Barkley for the majority of that game besides one 41-yard catch. And after a tough loss for Green Bay, I think this defense travels on the road good, and they're going to make it a tough day for New York. And especially if Green Bay gets off to an early start and the Giants trail in this game, I think the Packers defense is going to take care of the run in this one. Houston Texans at the Tennessee Titans. Woody Marks found the end zone last week, and I've been saying this as well. Woody Marks overall is the better running back. I know Nick Chubb's the veteran. I know he's physical in between the tackles, and Marks is a smaller back. But I think Woody Marks, he can handle it, and we've seen some smaller backs in the league handle full workloads. We've seen it with Devon Achane. We've seen it with DeAndre Swift. He's not the biggest back there. So I think Woody Marks, it's time to give him the reins over here as this Houston Texan team. He's a start. Nick Chubb is it. He's a running back. You got to rely on a touchdown for him to go out there and get fantasy points in Nick Chubb. And obviously, it just hasn't been there all season long. This Texan team playing better football over the last couple weeks. And this week in a slam dunk matchup, though, I still don't think Chubb will have much upside. He's a sit. Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, fringe options. Pretty much a 50-50 split over here in this Tennessee backfield between these two running backs. And Tony Pollard, we know him between the tackles. He'll be the guy in Tajay Spears and passing down, third downs. Spears is going to be the running back for this Tennessee Titan team. So Spears, in my opinion, has more upside where he catches the football out of the backfield. And also as well, the Titans most likely will be trailing in this game and have to play catch up and throw the football. Carolina Panthers at the Falcons. Rico Dotto, one of the best running backs in all fantasy football. And who would have thought this season, where he signed late in the offseason on a one-year deal with this Carolina Panther team. I know last season he did have 1,000 yards with the Dallas Cowboys. But like I said, he's one of the best running backs and more explosive backs in the league, where he's just carrying defenders and making big plays. He's a star. Chuba Hubbard got that contract extension last season, but obviously didn't mean much, where Rico Dotto, going back to week 5 and week 6, had 2 games over 200 yards from scrimmage, and he's never looked back. So Hubbard at this point, more of a change of pace, back up, nothing more. He's a sit. Falcons, Bijan Robinson a start. I know numbers have been dropping off the last 2 out of 3 weeks. Is Bijan Robinson, and the problem is Tyler Algier stolen 3 goal line touchdowns in the last couple games here for this Atlanta Falcon team. So Bijan's still making plays. More weeks than not, he's catching 4 or 5 passes as well out of the backfield. And this week in a great matchup back home indoors versus the Panthers, he's a start. Tyler Algier sit. His workload's just been inconsistent all season long. There's games we've seen him carry the football 3 or 4 times. And then a game like last week for Tyler Algier versus the Colts, we had 11 carries, 57 yards, and found Pater twice in that game. But this week versus the Carolina Panthers, I know it's a good matchup on paper. But like I said, his role, just you can't predict it week in and week out. He's a sit. Cincinnati Bengals at the Steelers. This could be another high-scoring game like it was early in the season on a Thursday night. And Chase Brown and this offense has really gotten things going over the last few weeks since they acquired Joe Flacco in the deal from the Cleveland Browns. And now with Joe Burrow possibly returning in Week 13, this offense could get to full potential by them. But this week at Pittsburgh, Chase Brown a start. He's playing good football, no competition there. Good receiver out of the backfield. And Jalen Warren a start as well, where Kenneth Gainwell, I thought after he had that big game early in the season in that overseas game versus Minnesota, that he was going to get more work, but that hasn't been the case. And Warren, he's hurdling defenders. We saw it on that Sunday night game at the Chargers, physical in between the tackles and could catch the football, and good in pass protection. So he's an easy start versus one of the worst defenses in the league in Cincinnati. San Francisco 49ers at the Arizona Cardinals. Christian McCaffrey, he's locked in weekly as a start for fantasy owners. He could do it all, 3 down back. I know Brian Robinson Jr. did go vulture the touchdown from him last week, but it was just one time. And like I said, this week in a great matchup versus a bad run defense of the Cardinals, he's an easy start. Trey Benson, we'll see if he comes off an IR this week for this Arizona Cardinal team. And if he does, he's a play for me in this one is Trey Benson. Good running back. He could do a little bit of everything. I know the injuries definitely set him back after James Conner being out for the season. It was going to be a big opportunity for Trey Benson, but obviously that didn't come to fruition. So if he does play and come back off injured reserve, he's a start. And Bam Knight, Amari DiMercato, both these running backs haven't done much to be viable fantasy options, where they're pretty much guys sharing in the backfield and getting 7-8 fantasy points from both of their sits. Seattle Seahawks at the Los Angeles Rams, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet. These guys every week, it's just someone different in the backfield, even though Kenneth Walker, it's been a down season all season long. At least with Charbonnet, he's got the touchdown upside. He's getting the goal line touches. And Kenneth Walker, you would think he'd be more of a receiver out of the backfield, but we really haven't seen much out of him in that aspect as well. So both these running backs with not high ceilings, even though they still produce at times, they're fringe options. Kyren Williams, a start. Kyren Williams signing that extension in training camp, and he's picked up where he left off over the last 2 seasons for this Ram team. So he fits this offense like a glove. His pass catching's getting better over the last couple weeks, and this week versus Seattle, where their defense is middle of the pack versus the run, he's a start. And Blake Corum is sit, but the thing with Corum the last 3 weeks, he's getting a good workload as Blake Corum in the backfield for this Los Angeles Ram team. But he's another guy, don't catch the football out of the backfield. And if he's not scoring touchdowns, he's not going to have value, but definitely is one of the best handcuffs in the league. I think Corum is. Kansas City Chiefs at the Broncos, Isaiah Pacheco. Even though it's not looking great, he's going to play in this week's game. He will be a sit. Kareem Hunt a sit. And Rashad Smith a sit. So this is a tough matchup versus one of the better defenses in the league. And we've seen it more times than not that most running back committees don't work. In Kansas City, they operate with all 3 of these running backs in and out of the ball game at different times. So this week at Denver with only 2 teams on bye, I don't see much upside in these Chief running backs. There sits J.K. Dobbins. He was banged up a little bit with the ankle injury. We got to wait and see if more comes out on that. But if he does play in this game, he's a start. One of the better rushing running backs in all the league, where he's top 5 in rushing yards this season is J.K. Dobbins. I know he don't do much receiving the football out of the backfield, or he don't even score a lot of touchdowns, but weekly, worst case, he's going to get you anywhere from 8 to 13 fantasy points is J.K. Dobbins. And R.J. Harvey, a fringe option. Touches haven't been there for R.J. Harvey. I know he had a game, 4 touchdowns in a 2-game span. We had 3 of them versus the Dallas Cowboys in Week 8, but obviously those numbers weren't going to keep up. But Harvey, another rookie running back, that opportunity could be there. But if J.K. Dobbins did miss this ball game, then Harvey, he's due for a breakout. But this week he's a fringe option. Baltimore Ravens at the Cleveland Browns, 2 good running backs going at it in this one. Derrick Henry, he's a start each and every week. It's been another solid season for Henry. I know he had a couple hiccups early in the season, but now the last few weeks he's running strong, and with Lamar back in this lineup, it opens everything up. Quinshon Judkins, he's a start. Baltimore's run defense, one of the worst running defenses in the league. We saw Aaron Jones even go out there, have 16 fantasy points in PPR leagues last week. And Quinshon Judkins, talented running back, and this week versus Baltimore, he's a start. Detroit Lions, Philadelphia Eagles, Sunday Night Football. Jahmyr Gibbs, what a ball game it was for him last week, having a monster game at the Washington Commanders after a bad performance going back in Week 9 for Jahmyr Gibbs. So Jahmyr Gibbs, we know he's one of the best running backs in the league, only in his 3rd season. This week, definitely a tough matchup at the Philadelphia Eagles. But I thought Josh Jacobs ran good versus them last week. I know they got reinforcements at the deadline. Jair Alexander, Deshaun Phillips, obviously, and Michael Carter in the secondary. But Jahmyr Gibbs, he's a matchup-proof running back. And like I said, he had a bad game a few weeks ago versus the Minnesota Vikings, but I think that was a fluky one. And then we saw last week what Gibbs could do when he's in space. So this week he's a start. David Montgomery, a fringe option. Touches have been there, 11 to 15 touches per game for Montgomery. But if he's not scoring a touchdown, upside really hasn't been there, unfortunately, for Monty. So this week, with a tough matchup versus the Philadelphia Eagles, he's a fringe option. Saquon Barkley, a start. And that's been a frustrating season for Barkley compared to last season. Obviously, we rushed for 2,000 yards and had an insane fantasy season. And last week, he was bottled up once again versus the Green Bay Packers with a 41-yard catch, where it was a nice spin move out of it, breaking the tackle and going down the sidelines made his day, or it would have been a single-digit fantasy day. But this week versus the Lions, where their run defense isn't all that great, I think Saquon is a good starting option this week. Dallas Cowboys at the Vegas Raiders to close it out on Monday Night Football. Javonte Williams, he's been a huge surprise this season for the Dallas Cowboys and fantasy football owners. And Williams each week, it seems like 10, 15 fantasy points. Worst case, he's behind one of the better offensive lines in the league. And when teams got to zero in on CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, and Jake Ferguson. There's going to be a lot of room where there's not going to be stacked boxes. So with all those factors and a great matchup at the Raiders, I think Javonte Williams could be a top 10 option this week. And Ashton Ginty a start. This Cowboy defense, one of the worst defenses in the league. I thought it's been a decent rookie season for Ashton Ginty. I know he's had some down games and then some big games for him, but that's what you're going to expect from a rookie. And also the offensive line isn't great for this Raider team. But like I said, this Cowboy defense can't stop anyone. I know they traded for Quinnen Williams and Donovan Wilson, but only have 1 week prep with a bye week to get those guys into the playbook. I don't think it's going to be much of a factor. And Ginty, I think, has a good game this week, and he's a start. So that's running back start, sit every matchup for week 11 of the fantasy football season.